Beruchim haboim, welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Samich Gimel Amud Aleph, starting with Daf Samich Beis Amud Beis, 4 lines from the bottom. Our Mishnah taught that when a person is shoichet a korban Pesach lamulim v'la'arelim, both for those who are circumcised as well as those who are uncircumcised, it's a valid korban. The Gemara now brings a brisa that takes issue with this and says the following. Tanya, Acherim Oimrim. Acherim said, now Acherim is identified as Rabbi Meir. Hiktim mulim la'arelim kosher. Arelim lemulim posel. He makes the following distinction. If it's shechted first for mulin and then for arelim, it's a kosher korban. But if it's in the opposite order, then it's posel. Ask the Gemara, Maishno mulin la'arelim de kosher. The kula arelim ba'inam v'leko. In the same way that we just said that if his shecht is first for those who are mulin and then arelim is going to be valid because it's miktsas that you have still is for the mulin and not entirely for the arelim. Ask the Gemara, then arelim lemulin nami kula arela korla orla ba'inam v'leko. So too when it comes to the other order, if you first are shechting for arelim and then for mulin, it should also be valid because, after all, it's only mitzas arelim and not kula arelim. And Daf Samach Gimel with Aleph at the very top. The Gemara asks, Leima kisavre acherim eina l'shchita ela b'soif. Does this mean to say that acherim, Rabbi Meir holds that shchita is eina shchita ela b'soif, meaning to say that only at the very end of the shechita is it considered to be the actual shechita. The physical act of the shechita, which requires cutting 2 simanim, that, until it's actually at the very end, halachically is the shechita. Whereas there's another manda Omer that says, no, mitchila ad soif, the beginning of the cutting of the first siman, until the very end of the cutting of the second siman, is considered to be the halachic shechita. So we want to suggest that, does that mean to say that Rabbi Meir Acherim holds that you are saying Ein l'shchita ella lebasoif, and therefore since Ein l'shchita ella lebasoif, so therefore that's why he holds what he does, ukiderave, and like that which Rava said, do Omar Rava adayin hi machlekes. Rava is referring to the following. When it comes to a person who says Harei zu korban oila, harei zu korban shlomim. In a case where he has a animal in front of him, and he wants to say harei zu tmuras oila, tmuras shlomim. So since he said both statements, according to Rabbi Meir, you're tfois loshen rishon, and therefore the animal, in addition to the animal that's a korban oila, this animal also gets the designation of a korban oila. He made it tmura. Whereas Rabbi Yossi is chaylik, and Rabbi Yossi we saw says that we take both statements seriously, they're both meaningful, and therefore the animal has both the kedusha of a korban oila as well as the kedusha of a korban shlomim. Now you can't bring up a korban with both as an oila and a shlomim, so therefore you have to allow the korban to then graze, become a bal mum. Once it gets a mum kavua, then you can sell it, take the proceeds and buy half with the money to buy a korban oila and the other half to buy a korban shlomim, and therefore you can then bring up the korbanos. That's according to Rabbi Yossi. What happens, however, when he says, instead of saying this is a tmuras oila and tmuras shlomim, he says chetzi oila and chetzi shlomim. Does Rabbi Meir still say that indeed tfois lashon rishon? So it's a machlokes. On that, Abayi says that the understanding of Rabbi Meir is that over here he would agree with Rabbi Yossi. The only reason why he disagrees with Rabbi Yossi in the first case, when he says tumuras oila, tumuras shlomim, is because since the oila is complete, it's already chal, therefore the tumuras shlomim cannot change that. So therefore, on that situation, Rabbi Meir says tfois lashon rishon. But if he says chatzi oilen chatzi shlomim, where it's possible that he does indeed want half and half. Therefore, on this, Rabbi Meir, says Abaye, would say that I agree with Rabbi Yossi. That Rabbi Yossi, I agree that it's going to be both an animal that has chetzi shlomim and chetzi oila. On that, Rava says no. Rava says it's not a matter of that it becomes already chal and you cannot go ahead and change that. That's not the vart. The vart over here is that when he says chetzi oila, so when he says chetzi oila, he intends that the carbon become the chetzi oila. Now, once that intention is so, then it is mispashet to become entirely an oila, and therefore tfois lashon rishon, even in this case of chetzi oila, chetzi shlomim. So we're going to say that Rava over here also says this din of tfois lashon rishon, whereby he would say the following: Hilkach kikdim mulin la'arelim. In a situation where you're makdim, and you say that he's shoichet the carbon pesach for both those who are mulin, circumcised, as well as those who are arelim, uncircumcised, in that order, then we say mulin chayli, orlin loy chayli. Then for the ones who are circumcised, it's chal. The ones who are not circumcised, it's not chal. Hikdim orlim lemoilin. However, he does in the opposite order. Then arlim chayli, mulin loy chayli. The one he mentioned first is chal, and the second one not. And therefore, this is then the whole inyan of eina l'shchita ela b'soif, like Rava is saying, whereby this is going to be then considered to be a distinction. If he then first shechs for the mulin and then the arelim, it's chal the mulin. It goes in the order, in the terms of the order that he said it. And since he said first, or for the arelim, for the mulin, therefore for the circumcised it will then be chal. However, it says for the arelim, then that will be taken for precedence, and that will become chal first. Omar Rabbi said you don't have to interpret. And by the way, we just said that this is going to be explaining the opinion of the Acherim, and that's how Rav explains Rabbi Meir, because Rabbi Meir indeed is Acherim. On that, Rabbi now says you don't have to explain the Rabbi Meir to explain it in this way. It can be explained other way. Omar Rabbi argues loy la'olam kisova Acherim yeshna l'shchita mitchila v'atzav. Really, you can explain that even Rabbi Meir agrees that when it comes to shchita, the halachic shchita, it begins when he begins cutting the first siman and completes itself at the very end of that cutting the second siman. So what's the pshat over here? He explains, what is the machlokes over here? What are we talking about? Kigoin shegomar beliboy litrovayu bein lemulim bein la'arelim. He has intention that he wants to then shecht both the carbon pesach for the mulin and the arelim. V'hoitzi mipiv la'arelim v'lo speak loyma lemulin asher nigmar shchita ba'arelim. And he says he's going to be shechting it for the arelim, and then when he completes the shchita, only then he gets a chance to say for mulin. So it's too late. So therefore, it comes out that when he did for arelim and then mulin, it's not valid. And they're arguing about the following. Rabbi Meir sova loy ba'inam piv libo shavim, v'rabbanan savre ba'inam piv libo shavim. And it comes out that Rabbi Meir says that we not require that the mouth, even though his intention was to have both for arelim and mulin, and he only said for arelim, that's okay. It doesn't have to be that piv and libo shavim. Whereas the Rabbanan say it does have to be shavim, and therefore they would say in such a case it is valid, because he intended for both for the arelim and the mulin. Ask the Gemara, "V'ksav Rabbi Meir lo ba'inam pi v'libo shavin." Is that so? That Rabbi Meir does not require that what he expresses with his mouth be the same as what his intention was? V'raminu, behold, it says in the following Mishnah, "Hamiskavein loymar truma v'omar meiser." He is intending to take out truma from this crop, and instead he states that it's meiser. Meiser v'omar truma, or vice versa. Or he makes a neder, he's not going to enter the bias A, and instead he states, even though he intends not to then go into bias A, but instead of saying it, he said bias B. Or he makes a neder. He's not going to be nena from this. That's what he intends to say, but instead he states something else. Loy amar klum. He didn't say anything because what he expressed with his mouth is not the same as his intention. And since it's a Stam Mishnah, and Stam Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, so we see over here from this Mishnah that Rabbi Meir does require pivi v'libo shavin. Elomar Abaye, therefore Abaye rejects what was just said by Rabbah, and he says the following. He explains, Reisha the Omar Simin Rishon lemulin v'simin sheni af la'arelin. He says, at first, right, the Reish is talking about when he starts shechting it for the mulin and then for the arelin. He says that the simin rishon, the first of the two simanim that he has to then sever in order to make the shechita, he does it for the mulin, and the second one then is for the arelim. So he states the first one for the mulin, and then he intends, of course, to then also then make the second severance for the second simin for the arelim. The besimin sheni nami pesichi be mulin. That it could come out that the second simin includes, it's coming to then be mixed together with that which he stated in regards to the mulin, what he originally stated. So therefore it's going to be valid because it's going to have both the mulin and the arelim together. Whereas the Sefer Damar Simin Rishon la'arelim, Simin Sheni lemulin. Whereas in the Sefer, where he stated Simin Rishon, the first Simin that he severs, is for arelim, and then the second one, Memela, will then become for the mulin. That's what he has intention for. Here we say the besimin rishon holo psiche be mulin. Here comes out when he then severed for the arelim, it did not include the mulin. So again, in the Reisha, when he severs for the mulin, and then he ultimately severs for the arelim, it has both. That means the mulin and the arelim are biyachad. But in the Seifa, when he first is shechting for the arelim, he doesn't have mixed with it the kavanah for the mulin, and therefore it's invalid. Rabbi Meir l'taimei, and Rabbi Meir, according to his own reasoning, the Omar mefaglin bechatzi matir. V'rabbanan taimei the mamrei ein mefalglin bechatzi matir. It states over there menachos that in order to then matir the mincha offering, so there's two things that require that to be matir. You have the flour, and you also have then the levoina. Then it's brought on the mizbeach. If he only then brings one as mefagil, the hainu, for one of those matirin, we're calling it half of it. He had the wrong kavana. He had the improper pigul type of kavana. Then, according to Rabbi Meir, that's enough for it to be pigul, whereby if he were to eat the mincha offering afterwards, he would be chayiv kares. Whereas the Rabbanan say, until you have the entire thing, both chetzi and chetzi, the entire thing that's matir, only that will then be mefagil. So it comes out, each one according to his shita. And therefore, Rabbi Meir, l'shitasa, over here would say again, in the ratio, when you then are going to shech the Korim Pesach, for mulin and then for arelim, so that comes out very good that the sim is going to be both for the arelim and the mulin. But when you do in the opposite order, you begin for the arelim, then there's no kavanah for the mulin inside of it, whereby it's going to be only for the arelim, and that's going to be possible.